gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government. Do you still think that jet fuel brought down the World Trade Center?
We were born to the floor. We won't be downtrodden anymore. Learn alone. Want yourself a set of scores with all my height. Stand with shoulders wide. Step clean out of line. Hold my head up high. You can't take my eyes. I still take to flight. They can't break my mind. What I'm born with is mine. Remember who you are. Remember who you are. Find your feet. Take to the streets. No compound gloriously. The first elite has no power over me. With all my height, stand with shoulders wide. Stepping out of line. Hold my head up high. You can't take my eyes. I still take to flight. You can't break my mind. What I'm born with is mine. Remember who you are. Remember who you are. Stand as one, stand as one, stand as one. Stand as one, stand as one, stand as one. Stand as one, stand as one, stand as one. Stand as one, stand as one, stand as one. Stand as one, stand as one, stand as one. Stand as one, stand as one, stand as one, stand as one. Now with all my height, still shoulders wide, stepping out of line, hold my head up high. You can't take my eyes, I still take to flight. You can't break my mind. What I'm born with is mine. Remember who you are. Remember who you are. Remember who you are. Remember who you are. Thank you.
Hey. Oh, quick. Rolf, welcome. Oh, great. Gareth's terrific. Hello, thank you. Just to say in relation to Gareth, the song he started out with today, you know, Get Your Love On, it's available in the foyer for a donation. I think £1 is the less donation, and all profits for anyone who buys it anywhere go to Gaza charities. So, well done, Gaz. Now, awaken, awaken, awaken. Well, we're going into some challenging information here and in the next section, so let me focus again. The idea that this is a lost cause that we're involved in here is no way is a lost cause. We take our power back, game over. So we can paint another picture. Please hold that thought, because it's very, very important we don't get pulled into fear by seeing what we're involved with. Now, Gino Krishnamurti said something very, very true when he said, if we can really understand the problem, the answer will come out of it, because the answer is not separate from the problem. They're indivisible. And you know, what I find in like some what they call New Age areas and stuff like that is, you mustn't talk about anything negative. Oh no. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never come across any knowledge that was negative. I've come across knowledge I'd rather not be true, but I've never come across knowledge that's actually negative. Ignorance is freaking negative, not knowledge, because you can do something with knowledge. And so the idea that, you know, we should be frightened of looking at things as they really are, I mean, it's just another version of looking the other way and hoping it will go away. It won't. So when people say, well, what's the solutions? Well, fundamental to any solution is to understand the nature of what we're dealing with. Because then we've got a much better chance of dealing with it. We know what we've got to deal with. And, you know, a lot in the conspiracy research arena, like I said earlier, brilliant. There's so many people involved in this now. But the vast majority of them will not go even close to where we're going to go in the next 2 hours or so, because of religious belief systems, or because, well, even if it's true and I say it, I'm going to lose my credibility. I think you lose your credibility if you don't go with what you believe to be true, and you edit that on the basis of what will people think of me if I say it. That's how we got into this frickin' mess. And unless we understand how deep the rabbit hole goes and what we're dealing with, we're never gonna find an answer to it. And just stockpiling weapons and fighting the system is just playing into the system's hands for reasons that will become clear, indeed, possibly already have. So we are infinite awareness, capable of multiple realities and perceiving multiple realities. We've been caught in the bamboozle, which has led to this and this through the control of perception. So who or what is ultimately behind this? Or at least the depth of the rabbit hole we've got so far. Well, they ain't, for a start. Because they're just here today, gone tomorrow, people who are just puppets of a system that's here yesterday, today, tomorrow, and the next day. It's not him. I don't care if he's supposed to be the most powerful man in the world. He ain't. He's another bloody glove puppet. And anyone in that job, the same applies to. It's not him either. Here today, gone tomorrow, presidents and leaders who are replaced by other leaders. But the system, the direction goes on, because there's something behind that that's pushing that direction on. And nor even is it the corporations. They're still at the level of playing out the control. It's not actually at the point of creating it. It's not the origin. It's not people sitting around tables. They're still at the point of playing it out. You can go into the shadows and you can get closer to where it's coming from, but you're still at the play out level. You go even deeper into the rabbit hole, really deep into the web. And that's where you find people like the Rothschilds and such like. You don't see us, but we control your life. But there's levels beyond that, where it's coming from. But where is it? Okay, well, I'm going to cut to the frickin' chase, really. The truth doesn't change because you don't want to hear it. Now, obviously, I can't go into great detail with this. I mean, the perception deception is that bloody big. The whole day is about connecting dots to show the picture. And all I can say is for 25 years, I've been full-time on this, and the evidence has brought me to this conclusion. There's no one out there, you see. All that is, there's no one out there. And when you think that what we're seeing is only what is within a narrow band of visible light, and then you think what possibilities lie beyond that in the great infinite forever, the idea that we are alone is absolutely beyond ludicrous. And the fact that you can be seen as crazy for believing that shows how inverted the system is. This reality, this infinity, is teeming with different expressions of life. And some of it's interacting with us. This is Professor of Mathematics and Astronomy at Queen's Mary University, London, Bernard Carr. He said, our consciousness interacts with another dimension, actually many other dimensions. Our physical senses only show us a three-dimensional universe. What exists in the higher dimensions are entities we cannot touch with our physical senses. Exactly. So the idea that we just operate in isolation of everything else is, for me, crazy. So like I say, I'll cut to the chase. This reality that we're experiencing has been hijacked by a force that some ancient people call archons, but there's different names right across the ancient world for the same force, the same entities. This is when the penny drops, when all these different names for the gods all over the world turn out to be different names for the same force, because they're described in the same way. And all over the world you see this. In the Far East, Central America, and other places, they're known as the serpent gods. The Zulus call them the Chitahuri, the children of the serpent. They're the Anunnaki in Sumer, Babylon, now Iraq. They're our snake brothers to the Hopi people of North America. They're the star people, many, many examples of that. They are the demons of Christianity. To the Gnostics, they are archons. And to the Islamic and pre-Islamic world, they're called the jinn. And in their prime form, they are energetic in nature, but they can take form, as I will talk about. So, like I say, they're described so much in the same way, because they're different names for the same thing. So, the Gnostic people, not the Christian Gnostics, the pre-Christian Gnostics, that ran the great library at Alexandria, and they also manifested as the Cathars in southern France. They say that the archons are made from luminous fire. The jinn, according to Islamic and pre-Islamic belief, are made from smokeless fire. And you see this correlation of description wherever you go. Now, this, for me, was one of the great finds ever in terms of understanding the nature of what is happening. At Nag Hammadi in Egypt, about 77 miles north of Luxor on the Nile, in 1945, a sealed jar was found with loads and loads of documents in it, leather-bound. And they told the beliefs and the perceptions of this people called the Gnostics. And the Gnostics had a completely different view of reality than religion, which is why the Roman Catholic Church and the Roman Church tried to destroy them wherever they got any strength and any foothold. They ran the great library at Alexandria, which had something like 500,000 scrolls detailing the beliefs of the ancient world and the history of the ancient world, destroyed by the Roman Church. And like I say, the Cathars, who were destroyed again by the Roman Church in 1244, I think it was, at that place in France, Montségur, that fort on the hill where I've been a couple of times. The religious establishment wanted these people destroyed because they were dangerous, because they had the truths they didn't want the people to know about. And this is what these scrolls and this find at Nag Hammadi said. 1/5 of the texts, and there were lots of them, were about a force they called the archons, which they say created our physical universe, and they equated them with the Judeo-Christian Yahweh Jehovah God. And when you see the Old Testament kill 'em and flog 'em and all that stuff God, it fits precisely with the descriptions of the archons by the Gnostics. So what they say in these writings, in these texts, is that, well, first of all, archon means prince, ruler, authorities, or from the beginning. That's why they use the word archon. They said that the archons and the Lord Archon, which they called the demiurge, was a fake god that created our physical or material reality as we perceive it. The Gnostics related the demiurge, like I say, to the Judeo-Christian Yahweh, Jehovah God, and they are inorganic, not resulting from or produced by growth. They are artificial. And they say in these texts that they created the inorganic parts of the solar system, but that the sun, the moon, and the earth were a system that were of itself and different from the rest, which was kind of interesting with what will come later. They said that the demiurge archons had no creative imagination and envy humans because we have. They're like cyborgs. Again, we're coming back to the inorganic. Like cyborgs, a robotic race that can imitate but not innovate. And the word they used was counter-mimicry. Now, what they were saying, in effect, is if you gave these archons a blank sheet of paper, they could create nothing on it. They don't have that creative imagination, that what was called intentionality. But you give them something with a piece of paper with something on it, and they can twist it and manipulate it once it exists. And they used the term fantasia, because these entities, they said, just as the Islamic people say about the jinn, have the ability to create virtual reality illusions. They're mind parasites. They possess humanity and manipulate the way they perceive everything. And they say the word you could use more than any about the archons was deception. They are deceivers. And what they create is an inversion of the natural order, which will become so crystal clear as we go along. Why? Interesting, like we see these different names, and actually for the same thing. The classic Satan is called the deceiver and the demon of demons, as this demiurge is called the archon of archons, the Lord Archon. Now, as I've kind of studied this and put it together, it seems to me that what we're looking at is what I would call a self-aware distortion, and it's self-aware inversion. Now, this is why the first 2 hours of today was so important. Everything is conscious. Even a distortion is conscious. Even an inversion is conscious, but it's conscious in a way that reflects the inversion and the distortion. And if you look at what we call evil, it is live written backwards. Evil is simply an inversion of life, an inversion of perception, and evil is extreme ignorance, which is the inversion of truth and awareness. And because this force, this archontic force, shall I call it, is an inversion of life, that's why it and anything attached to it is obsessed with death, which is an inversion of life. And so you get the Satanists who worship these gods in their rituals obsessed with death. That's why they're attracted to churchyards and cemeteries and stuff. And so the death cult, which is what this archontic force and its followers are, is about destroying. It's about killing. And whereas the natural order is about life and abundance. And so when you look at the way the system, the archontic system that I'll come to, is destroying life. It's destroying life in war, but it's destroying life, the natural world. And it seems a contradiction, but it's not, because that's their world. The archon world described by the Gnostics is one of death, one of no creative imagination. It's a death cult, and all this pollution and environmental devastation is absolutely what it wants, because that's its reality. And the other thing about the archontic mind is it's what we call psychopathic. They're psychopaths, the definition of which is this: no empathy, no remorse, no empathy, no ability to put themselves in the feelings of those that suffer the consequences of their actions. Once you have no empathy, you have no limit to what you will do because you have no emotional consequence for doing it. No remorse for what you do, no shame. Parasites overwhelmingly. Why? Because they have no creativity of their own, so they have to parasite off the creativity of the target population. That's what the system does. Look at banking. What else is that but an exercise in parasites? And these people, which manifest as many world leaders and all the rest of it I'll come to, are pathological liars. What is a pathological liar? An inversion of truth, inversion. And they'll do whatever it takes to get their end goal. Other thing, the Gnostics used in these texts the word hal, meaning simulation. They talked about the fact that these archons could create what we would call virtual realities through controlling perception. They said about the archons, they make something appear to happen that does not happen. They can induce a virtual reality experience in the translation. And what do the Islam and pre-Islamic world say about the jinn? They can manipulate humans by creating illusions. This will become big time relevant the longer we go into this 2 hours. So we're back to this, that what our reality does or is, it's possibilities and probabilities folded into existence by perception. So this whole archontic system is about programming our perception, programming a distortion of our perception, an inversion of our perception, which is why we live in a madhouse, because it's an inversion of the natural order. So the idea is to disconnect the human mind, the human droplet, from the ocean and lock us into this tiny set of frequencies which then we perceive as all that there is to see, and gotcha. Now, before this, what I call hack, and you'll see why I say hack shortly, there was another world described by the ancients, and very much along the lines of the Avatar movie and the Na'vi, the blue people, and how they interacted with the natural world, how they communicated with animals, how they communicated with each other beyond speech. And what the Gnostic texts say is that the archons made a bad copy, as they describe it, of our original reality. The original reality was that kind of Avatar world. And when you say that without the first 2 hours, it would sound ludicrous and ridiculous, and that's impossible. But we're not dealing with the physical. We're dealing with information. That world is an information construct which we decode into a lovely world. This is an information construct which we decode into the world that we have today. And the idea, this might need a battery, mate. The idea is was to create this illusory reality and replace the old reality, and then this needs a battery, I think, because it's going on me. Anyway, and then tuning humans into that bad copy. Now, when you think about it, we're tuned into an information field of certain frequencies. We decode that into a reality. If we are then moved, our dial is moved, so we're decoding something else, we just decode another completely different reality. And that's what is meant by this bad copy. So this is an image that sums it up. I'm walking outside in the sun. You don't have to be in the sun. You just have to decode the fact you're in the frickin' sun. And it's the same with this bad copy. You just decode a reality and you think it's real because it's the only one that you can perceive. So you can decode a reality of the Avatar kind, and then you are fed a different information source, tuned into it, ways that I'll come to, and then you decode a different reality, what I call the archontic reality. And this, I would strongly suggest, is the fake reality that we have been decoding through what we call known human history, modern human history, and further, that we think is just a natural world. It ain't. If you can create a virtual reality simulation, then you can create an alternative to it as well, which is what the bad copy is. And you're tuned to it through something called entrainment. Entrainment is the process by which, if you have 3 violins and they're all plucked to the same note, therefore they are the dominant frequency, put another violin in there, either plucked to another note or not plucked to any note, and it will start vibrating in sympathy with them, because they're the dominant frequency. And if you can create a dominant frequency, then you can start to entrain the human decoding system into that frequency, and suddenly you're decoding a completely different reality. And once that happens, they gotcha. If you don't realize that's what's happened, because to you, well, this is how it is, mate. This is the world, isn't it? Well, what world is it? That's my question. And, you know, I liken this archontic distortion, inversion, to a computer virus. It absolutely fits. A computer virus, in our terms, obviously not exactly the same, infecting human perception. So what is, like I said earlier, a computer virus? It's rogue information. It's just introducing into the original system rogue information which distorts their word again and inverts the original system. So this is what a computer virus can do. Damage files, slow the system, show messages, take control. And how a computer virus works: a virus is a small piece of software that piggybacks on real programs. The archons do not have creative imagination. They cannot create. They can only distort what already exists. How can you describe a computer virus in better terms than that? Similar to the way a biological virus must hitch a ride on a cell, a computer virus must piggyback on top of some other program or document in order to launch. Once a computer virus is running, it can affect other programs or documents. It has piggybacked the original reality and has distorted it. And this is what is manifested as what the Gnostics called a bad copy. Now, we are taking energy sustenance from the energetic field. And we take energy from that field within the frequency band that we're vibrating to or resonating to. We can't take it outside of that band because we can't sync with it, like Radio 1 can't sync with Radio 2. So if you are a distortion and an inversion, you cannot get energetic sustenance from the natural order because you're not in that frequency band. So to get your sustenance, your energetic sustenance, you have to get it from other distorted energy which is in the frequency band that you are interacting with. And so the peoples around the world, the different cultures, etc., talk about the fact that these entities, it's a universal virtually description, feed off human energy, but not just any human energy. Low vibrational, as I would call it, human emotion. They feed off fear and anxiety and frustration and anger and conflict and war because they are a distortion of the natural order of love, peace and balance. And thus, these archontic inversions, energies can feed off them. And so, it's very like in the Matrix where the machines, again, inorganic, were feeding off human energy. And so, while we, coming from the natural order perspective of love and peace and harmony, think that war and suffering and fear are a bad thing, to them, they are essential to their energetic survival. That's why they create them. This archontic inversion, which expresses itself in multiple ways, can't sync with that. That's what it needs for its sustenance. Thus, it has manipulated the structure of our society to generate it in unbelievable abundance. All these things that we talked about earlier, all generating low vibrational human emotion. And anyone thinks that, it's kind of just some airy-fairy imagination. This was what happened to the energy field, the Earth energy field, at the time of 9/11, when there was that massive emotional explosion in response to what happened in New York and Washington. We are impacting upon it. And this is just a few days ago in a newspaper. Babies smell their mother's fear to learn what to be afraid of. Mothers emit odors that teach their babies what to be afraid of, even if the fearful experience is one the baby has never been exposed to, according to this study. Even, in the frickin' womb, the new life is being prepared for a lifetime of fear. What is fear? Lunch to these people. They are feeding off all this emotion and low vibrational energy. And that's why the pressure is to create events all the time that produce more, and against going the other way that produce less. And so this scene in the Matrix was very much in line with what I'm talking about. The Matrix is a computer-generated dream world built to keep us under control in order to change the human being into one of these. And on one level, that's what we are. Generators of distorted emotional energy. And you talk to alternative healers and people on the true cutting edge of healing, and they'll tell you that virtually every illness is based in emotion. Because emotion creates energetic distortions, not only to be absorbed by these entities, this distortion, but also to be trapped in the body, which manifests then as dis-ease, disharmony in the body, caused by emotion. So Carl Sagan's bamboozle is really the inversion of the natural order, which is why this world is turned on its head. Wherever you look, it's an inversion of what not just we would like it to be, but an inversion of the original reality that it replaced. And this is one reason why you get Satanists and stuff like that using inverted symbols for their symbolic language. Everything is inverted for the reasons I'm talking about. And I've used this quote before, but how much more relevant is it now from Michael Elner? Just look at us. Everything is backwards. Everything is upside down. Doctors destroy health. Lawyers destroy justice. Universities destroy knowledge. Governments destroy freedom. The major media destroy information. And religions destroy spirituality. Inversion everywhere. And these expressions of this archontic force are genetic liars, because lying is an inversion of truth. And this archontic energetic inversion, distortion, is not in this reality in form, although it can be, as I'll come to, but it exists in a reality very close to this one. And the idea is to distort our reality more and more, so it starts to blend and combine and come together with theirs. They are seeking to turn this reality into an extension of their reality through distortion and inversion. Now, this is Eben Alexander. He said that when he had his massive near-death experience, the first place he went to was very unpleasant. And to me, what he described was very much like this archontic realm that I'm talking about. He said he heard the sound of rhythmic pounding that was distant yet strong, a little like a heartbeat, but darker and more mechanical that keeps coming up. Cyborg. Like the sound of metal against metal, as if a giant subterranean blacksmith is pounding an anvil somewhere off in the far distance. Pounding so hard that the sound vibrates through the earth or the mud or wherever it is that you are. Reptilian, worm-like creatures crowded past him, he said, and sometimes rubbing against him with their smooth and spiky skins. Faces bubbled up out of the darkness and became ugly and threatening. The pounding intensified and became like the work beat for some army of troll-like underground workers. He became aware of a smell, a little like feces, a little like blood, a little like vomit, a biological smell, in other words, but of biological death, not biological life. And whatever, that fits absolutely the descriptions of these entities and this inversion. And they're seeking to bring their reality into ours by sinking their frequency. The Golden Age society, the way it's described, and again in the way the Avatar movie portrayed that society, was a heart society. This was the point from which they interacted with the world, the heart, which allowed them to experience reality outside the bounds of time and space. When you come from the heart, you don't do hatred. The heart doesn't hate. The heart doesn't seek to destroy. And so this inversion was about taking the point of interaction with the world from the point of love, heart, into the emotions. And how do we see now our society and how people interact with it from the level of emotional response and emotional reaction instead of here? And when that moves to that we interact with the world here, the world dramatically changes. And so, like I said earlier, with this heart coherence with the central nervous system and the brain, once we get into this, we start to disconnect from the heart, disconnect from beyond time and space, and start to have this as the governor of our perception. And if you take it in a computer game terms, the idea is to pull us into the lowest level where this archontic force works from. Now, these Gnostic writings have been estimated to have been buried in that sealed jar between about 350 and 400 AD, which corresponds with the destruction of the great library of Alexandria run by Gnostic thinkers. But it's suggested that they were possibly written about 100 AD. In those documents, all that time ago, best part of 2,000 years, they say that the archons can take form, and the main forms they take are reptilian entities and those known today as greys. The archons describe the greys as like an unborn baby or fetus with grey skin and dark, unmoving eyes. That was nearly 2,000 years ago, and it's the same description as what we call grey entities today in the modern world. And of course, I've been saying for a long time now that behind the human networks of control is a reptilian form. But I did say a long time ago, I didn't think it ended there. I thought it went into the realms of something else, and this something else is this archontic inversion, I would suggest. So when I was talking about the reptiles, of course, I got lots of ridicule. Hey, he's mad. And my response to that has always been the same as well. This has been my feeling about what they say. Because I simply want to know what the bloody hell's going on, me. Just want to know what's going on. Whatever it is, I want to know. And if people don't like it, well, they do the other thing, that's just as good. But is it madness, or is it seeing beyond the program? Like I say, condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance. But they say it's rubbish, but they don't investigate it. And yet, when the Daily Mail runs a story from some chemist, scientist, a few years ago, who said that he thinks from his research that there are reptilian entities all around in other dimensions, then he was treated as dead straight because he's a scientist, so he must know what he's talking about. And there was another study which was kind of projecting what some of the dinosaurs would look like if they hadn't been wiped out, as they say. And they came up with the fact that by now they would be humanoid reptilian entities like that, which is interesting because when you look at the descriptions around the world, this is a Zulu description, this is a painting made by a Spanish artist who said he interacted or experience these reptilian entities, they are described in remarkably similar ways. And this is something called the Chani Project. And it's one of those kind of things that happen so often when I'm researching. I'll come to conclusions and I'll write it, and then something will come along and it will say, look at this. And long after I'd been writing about these reptilian entities, I read this article. I was in Nexus magazine, and it was by a whistleblower about a project called the Chani Project, Computer Interface Communication with Other Realms. And he said that in the 1990s here, 1994, for 5 years, they, at a kind of similar thing to what's happening at CERN, it was one of these collider things, but in Africa and smaller. For 5 years, they interacted through computer systems with an entity in another dimension, another reality, and asked a total of 20,000 questions. And interestingly, this is what came through this entity, according to this Chani Project. A reptilian race was holding back humans so they couldn't grow. The entity said they had fought many battles against the reptile race in their own reality. Humans were more evolved spiritually than the reptiles, but they suppress humans with their technology. Their God is their technology. That will become seriously relevant later in the day. But look, what did the Gnostics say? That humans have creative ability, where the archons don't. It says here, more spiritually evolved than the reptiles, but we are suppressed through technology. And what I was talking about, tuning humans into the fake reality, this brings us to endless stories of the manipulation of human genetics. Some appear in things like the Bible, but you find them all over the ancient world, again, relating to these gods of different names, which turn out to be basically the same. So in the Gnostic writings, they talk about, and remember, these have been in a sealed jar since about 350 AD. They've not been tinkered with and changed like the biblical texts that were expressions of these in many ways, but were out in the public arena and therefore could be changed. These have been sealed all that time. The Lord Archon, what they call the Demiurge, said, "Come, let us create a man according to the image of God and according to our likeness, that his image may become a light for us, a vehicle for us." And this brings us to the biblical texts, which again are mirrored all over the ancient world. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. And, you know, in this Noah film in 2014, they symbolized the bloodline with the human finger and the reptilian-covered finger. Very, very symbolic and very true. Now, anyone thinks that all this genetic stuff is modern. It ain't. This is known as the genetic disc for obvious reasons. It was found in Colombia, and it is thousands of years old. And on this disc, which is incredibly well preserved, are images of human eggs and sperm that can only be seen under a microscope. And it talks about the birth process internally as well as externally, and the entities that it is portraying certainly ain't human. And you've got the Zulu, Chitahori, the children of the serpent, with Credo Mutra, who's well into his 90s now. And this is one of the paintings he did of descriptions of this Chitahori. And on one of his ancient artifacts that goes back at least 500 years, called the Necklace of the Mysteries, these images, these symbols, are used by the Zulu shaman to tell the story of Africa and the story of the human story. And pride of place at the front is a non-human entity and a human woman. And let's say that fits into that. And this is one of the flying saucer type image at the bottom. And I asked him what that was. He said, that's what the stories say the Chitahuri came to Earth in. But this, he said, is symbolic of the interbreeding between humans and the Chitahuri to create a hybrid race. This is the whole point. If you're at that level of understanding how reality works, you don't have to have literal interbreeding to change the human form into some kind of hybrid. You know, what we are doing is receiving and transmitting information. And if you change the information that the receiver, transmitter, decoding system is receiving, and that information relates to the human form, you can mutate the human form simply through getting people to decode that information. You see, the reason that radiation causes mutations is because it distorts the natural order of the body energetically, and then that transmits itself as a mutation of the form. Form is information. Change the information, you change the form if you can get the original form to decode that information. In other words, you transmit it on the right frequency. And of course, they're doing all this stuff now, as I said earlier. Now humans are doing it at our point of understanding. And so once humans were locked into this fake reality, they were into this round and round the garden world of limitation and suppression and control that we've been in ever since. And Carl Sagan, who knew far more than he was saying, he wrote a book called The Dragons of Eden about the impact of, in many ways, reptilian genetics upon human behavior and human personality. And he says, in effect, you can't really understand the human personality unless you understand the reptilian part of the human form. And one of the things he was massively referring to was the reptilian brain. Everybody has what they call a reptilian brain or an R complex, and it very much relates to emotion. And it's my view that before this genetic tinkering took place, either the reptilian element wasn't there, or it was much less influential, much smaller in its impact than it is today. This is the kind of thing that smacks on the brakes when someone walks in front of your car. It doesn't do critical thinking or working it all out. It's reactive. It's constantly scanning the environment for dangers of various kinds to the operating system. And this is mainstream science. From the reptilian brain, we get primitive and emotional responses. Lunch, for a start. Cold-blooded behavior and territoriality. Mine, it's mine, and you can't have any part of it. A desire to control, an obsession with hierarchical structures of power, which is exactly the way they've structured human society. Aggression, might is right, winner takes all, coming from the reptilian brain. Protecting status, power, reputation, superiority, intellectual preeminence, acquiescence on another level to hierarchy and authority. And for me, of course, there was a very big reptilian input in the Garden of Eden story, which again you find in different versions all around the world. And it talks about the fall of man. I suggest what that fall was the fall down the frequencies from here to here into denser matter, or what we call matter. And it says in the Bible, behold, Adam is become as one of us. I would suggest become of the archontic mind, knowing good and evil. And what is knowing good and evil? It is knowing duality. When you're in a reality based on oneness, based on the heart, which doesn't do duality, then there is no duality. Everything just is. But when you start to pull that unity, that oneness, into different elements of itself, then you can get polarity, you can get duality, and from duality comes conflict, and from conflict comes the energy that they seek, from love to fear, into duality. And so, as we've gone through this period of known human history, this computer virus, if you like, this distortion, has distorted the waveform energetic level of this reality, and we are decoding it through into holographic distortions, like wars and conflicts and people dying of hunger in a world of plenty, where it's all about me instead of all about what is right. And we're locked into this frequency band, thinking it is all that there is. Now, of course, throughout known human history, this theme of possession has been going. Some entities possessing someone and taking over their mental and emotional faculties, their sense of reality. And what that is that on one level, like I said in the first 2 hours, we are an energetic field. You can photograph one level of it, the auric field. And from that auric field is projected the holographic so-called physical world, physical self. What these entities do on an energetic level is lock into that waveform level of the human form. And once they make a connection with it, a frequency connection with it, they can start influencing the perceptions of that person. Now, the more that they impose their information field into the possessed information field, the more the information change is starting to affect the hologram and what the hologram looks like. And when you therefore get these possessed people that actually start to form, that's because so much of the information from the possessing entity has entered the possessed entity that it has started to change the nature of the holographic form. And so you get the exorcist type shift with some devilish face taking over from the human one. But that's an extreme version. But if they can lock into any level, they can start to influence your perception. And interesting, this is a Native American concept of inside of us are two wolves. One they say is evil, it's anger, sorrow, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, all these things. And on the other one, what they call is good, joy, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, all that stuff. And they say, which wolf wins? And they talk about human nature. Well, it's human nature, mate. But is it? Is that human nature? Or is that the distortion seeking to impose itself on human nature? And imposing itself so much that that concedes itself to that and collectively creates a world that reflects that. Which one wins? Well, which one wins in their terms depicts which world wins. That love, benevolence, empathy, think of the world that that would create and once was before the hijack, compared with the world we have now, where we are manipulated more and more into destruction and conflict. Giordano Bruno again. The divine light is always in man and woman, presenting itself to the senses and to the comprehension, but man rejects it because that divine light is beyond the program, consciousness beyond the program, and if we don't reach that level of frequency, we cannot connect with it, and that's what the archontic forces are focused on doing, is holding us out of that connection. So, in plain sight, reptilian gods, it's all over the place. The oldest form of human worship is the worship of the snake or the reptile or the serpent. It goes back at least 70,000 years in Africa, Botswana, the Salido Hills, where the San people, better known as the Bushmen, say that the great python came with a bag of eggs to create humanity. I would say actually to manipulate humanity that existed at that time. This is a guy called Reverend John Bathurst Dean. I won't go through it because we've got so much to get through and I've been through this before. He wrote a book called Worship of the Serpent in 1933. It was a work on the study of worship of the serpent and the snake and the reptile imagery all over the world. It was massive. And he concludes that what follows after his research and all that is that the most ancient account respecting the cause and nature of the seduction of humanity must be the one from which all the rest are derived, which represent the victorious serpent, victorious over man in a state of innocence and subduing his soul in a state of what he would call sin into the most abject veneration and adoration of himself. And he's talking there about the whole concept, wherever he looked, of the fall of man was always related to some serpent figure, not just in Christianity, all over the world. Now, you can find serpent figures. This is a serpent, female and baby. This was one of the finds in the area now known as Iraq, Sumer, Babylon, etc. And it was the Ubaid people, which preceded Sumer a long, long time ago, BC. And you can see in the way they portrayed the pharaohs in Egypt, the cobra, as Credo Mutwa pointed out to me, is a massive symbol of this, what I would call now archontic race, this reptilian race that can take a reptilian form. There's the cobra head on the pharaoh. There's the belly of the cobra. There's the cobra coming out of what? The third eye. The Druids used to worship a serpent god called Hu. And this is the Nagas, a reptilian race in Asia that they said could take either human or reptilian form. Or there's the Mayan people. They worship the serpent god Kukulkan. And the folklore describes, of course, dragons and serpents. Then you've got the fairy stories of the prince turning into a frog, the frog turning into a prince. And what they call these reptilian bloodlines, which I'm going to come to, are the royal bloodlines because they are the bloodlines of the gods. And of course, in the East, the dragon is a massive central point in their imagery. You find around the world this theme of part serpent, part human, all over the place, the duality of them. And this is another common thing that you find, the serpent eating a human or eating a human baby, all over the place, all over the world. And you see it on Alfa Romeo even. And note the crown. Note how often the crown is used because these are considered royal bloodlines, these particular serpent archontic human bloodlines, which I'm going to come to. And when you look at the Hollywood and televisual portrayals around the world of non-human entities in reptilian form, they are incredibly the same or very, very similar to what people have described who've interacted with these entities. They worshipped the fish gods, as they called them in the ancient world, with the scales. And the fish god priests used to wear a hat like that because it was a fish head. And all the way through, this same theme has come into the Roman church, into the Christian church. And there you see the mitre, the fish head, the same as the worship of the fish gods in the ancient world. And there you see it in this country as well. So what you're looking at is secret societies. They worship a certain force, a certain god. You get religion. They're worshipping a certain god. They think they're different gods, but actually it's the same gods. And then you get Satanism. And at the level of Satanism, they are more knowingly worshipping the archontic satanic gods. But in the end, all these different forms, although the vast majority of them have no idea that's the case, are ultimately worshipping this force with tremendous implications that I'll come to. So, I mentioned these bloodlines. This archontic force does not operate in this dimension in the sense that this is not its frequency. So if it wants to pull it to be its frequency, but it can't be its frequency at the moment. So it needs a vehicle within visible light to work on its behalf while it works from the hidden. And so certain bloodlines were created specifically to be that vehicle. Human, archontic, human, reptilian hybrids. And you see the symbols of them with the number of times you see reptilian imagery in the coats of arms of the aristocracy and stuff. Of course, the City of London, the financial district, which is massively involved in the global conspiracy, also has tremendous reptilian imagery. Now, these bloodlines are like the in-betweeners, if you like. You've got the visible light frequency band, and you've got the entities outside of the band. These are the representatives within this frequency which can interact with this frequency and do the bidding of this hidden force. And like I say, it's like the scientist who can't work inside a tank with something that's dangerous, so he puts the gloves on and works from outside the tank and works in it through the gloves. If you take the scientist to be this archontic force, the tank to be our reality, and the gloves to be these bloodlines, that is the dynamic that we're looking at between this hidden force and the one we see. So what has been created is a hierarchy coming out of the hidden down into the seen to create and direct a society that generates maximum low vibrational energy and systematically imposes the virus upon our society more and more and more. And these bloodlines have a particular DNA. And what is DNA? It's an information field. And they, when they create hybrids and anything like that, they see it as a software program. They don't see it the way we see it. And so the reason that these bloodlines interbreed so incessantly, I mean, we see it with royals, but all these Eastern establishment families of the United States into banking and corporations, they interbreed just the same. It's to hold this information field, which has a certain series of personality traits which the archontic force wants in these hybrids because it makes them work on their behalf without any compassion or empathy or question in terms of the impact and suffering that they make people have. So this information field, this DNA, this hybrid, has the natural order traits that I talked in that wolf's image. It has them deleted. They have the ability to empathize deleted, the ability for remorse deleted, the ability to feel any emotional impact for what they do to others deleted. And what they are describing are psychopaths. These people are psychopaths in our reality on behalf of psychopaths operating outside our reality because they are an expression of this. No empathy, no remorse, no shame. How on earth can you bomb the living shit out of Gaza and have no emotional impact? How can you lie to justify the invasion of countries that kill and maim millions? How can you do that? Only if you have no ability to empathize and you have no emotional consequence for your actions. So, you think politicians are on the world? No, it's something very different, which the major politicians are an expression of. Some know, many don't. And the reason that these hybrids are so, I'll call them the elite for want of a word, are so important is because there is a hybrid genetics. It means, because when you go back, genetics is just an information field, a frequency field. The frequency of the hybrid is closer to the frequency of the archontic entities than the general run of the human population. So the ability to possess, control, and dictate their behavior is far more powerful with the hybrids than it is with the general population that have a different genetics. And this is a Swiss clairvoyant called Anton Steiger, who was telling the story of his life in an article. He wasn't talking about any of this stuff. He was just saying experiences he's had. And this was one of them. He can see beyond what we call the physical into the energetic levels. When I see people in business or politics who are particularly trapped by the material world, for example, I notice that they no longer have any light bodies at all. In many of these people, the point of light at the heart chakra, here we go, which is otherwise always present, is no longer visible to me. What do we call psychopaths? Heartless people. Instead, I see something like a layer of shiny tar around them, in which a monstrous being in the shape of a lizard can be distinguished. When such people speak on television, for example, I see a crocodile shape manifesting itself around the person like a concave mirror. I don't see the light of their throat and forehead chakra. And I've talked to people all over the world that can see beyond the physical, who don't describe exactly the same, but it's very, very similar in terms of this possession. There you go, there's one of them, look. It's just a trick of the light, don't worry. So, what we're looking at is dual DNA in these bloodlines, which is what? Dual information fields, which will explain something else in a second. So these people appear to be one thing, but they're actually behind the facade of the human facade, something else. We're not from these parts. And if you look at it, that Avatar movie was symbolic in so many ways. What the American invaders did in the Avatar movie is they infiltrated the Na'vi, the blue people, by looking outwardly like the Na'vi. So they didn't realize they were being infiltrated. That's what's happening here. That's what's happened for thousands of years. We've been infiltrated by a force taking over this reality that has fooled us because it looks human. And you know, this is today, the era of chimeras. Scientists fearlessly create bizarre human animal hybrids. Did you know that scientists are creating cow-human hybrids, pig-human hybrids, or even mouse-human hybrids? They're doing it now at our level of knowledge. And one day, very soon, or sooner than later, all the people have taken the piss all these years are gonna have to face the fact that this is freaking true, and this is why the world is as it is, and when we understand it, we can do something about it. So shape-shifting, another thing, what, you know, I'm supposed to be kind of off with the fairies. It's so simple once you understand reality. Shape-shifting is possible, shifting from one form to another because the body is not solid. And I talked just a few minutes ago about dual information fields because of the dual DNA. And what we have is the DNA, which is one information field, the DNA, which is the human information field. And what happens is, as one information field becomes dominant, it changes the holographic projection of the dual field. So, most of the time, virtually all the time, when we see them, they are projecting the human part of their dual DNA, which projects into the holographic world as a human-looking hologram. When there's a shift, they could do it at rituals, and they can also do it when they go through really extreme levels of fury and emotion, emotional anger. When the reptilian or the archontic part of the dual DNA information field becomes dominant, then the hologram reflects the information in that part of the dual DNA. And to the observer, and that's all that's happening, someone has shifted from one shape to another. All that's happened, there's been an energetic shift, and the observer has first decoded the human and then decoded the shifted information field, and to the observer, that person has shifted from one shape to another. It's just the way two different information fields are being decoded by the observer. People send me things all the time, and they sent me this one a long time ago because it looks like reptilian eyes. I'm not saying it is, but it's just a symbolic example of how people have described to me, because the eyes go more than anything. They say the eyes are the windows on the soul, and that's absolutely true. And interestingly, a friend of mine has an associate who went through a study to, well, you can't agree with it, but I don't know him, but to develop iris scanning technology. And it involved him scanning, he said, 2,300 eyes or pairs of eyes. And he said to my friend, the most amazing thing about the research, as he looked at the eyes at very, blown up level, that around 4% of those he looked at appeared to be of reptilian type in appearance. That's about 4 or 5% is the figure that keeps coming back to me over the years. And interestingly, I saw a figure the other day, they reckon about anything between 4 and 6% of the population are born psychopaths. Whether that's connected, well, have a think, I don't know. Now, so what we're looking at is behind the painted smile something very, very different. And you look here at one of the great traits of the reptilian brain. And of course, if you have more reptilian genetics, you're going to express the traits of the reptilian genetics information field more powerfully than the general population. And one of them is an obsession with ritualistic behavior and hierarchical structures of power. This is why things like royalty and the state are bloody obsessed with ritual. It all has to be at a certain time, in a certain place. It goes round and round, ritual, ritual, ritual. That's a classic trait of the reptilian brain. It's why people like Satanists are obsessed with ritual. The secret societies, of course, are obsessed with ritual. Religions are obsessed with ritual. Here you go. This is the lady. They're so freaking happy, these people, aren't they? Hey? They're so happy. And the emotionless state of so many of the royal family, the real genetically deep royal family, is classic reptilian brain archontic personalities. And you see the obsession with ritual. When they bring someone new in the bloody royal family, they have to send out a new list for who's got to curtsy or bow to who. I mean, they're bloody mad. It just happened to be head of state. Look at it. I know my place. Your lick majesty. Have you ever seen her do that to him? We elect him. We have no frickin' say in her. And yet, all these professions that are supposed to be serving the people and anyone who wants to become a citizen, they don't have to pledge allegiance, an oath of allegiance to the people or the countries, to her, to the frickin' monarch. They have no power, they're purely symbolic to bring the tourists in. Bollocks! They're not even bloody British, the German royal family. Oh, look, Philip, is that the Luftwaffe? I mean, what the fuck? I mean, they place them in here, that's your head of state now, well, thanks very much. Does she speak English? Look in this one. We parasite off you when we have contempt for you, but you just let us do it while asking God to save me. What the fuck? God save the Queen! Bollocks to the Queen! What? And I have to bloody smile. There's a big England football match and all the players are lined up and the crowd are there and we're all patriotic. Oh, yeah, we are. And they go, long to reign over us. God save the Queen. Long to reign over us. I ain't, but many people, most of them are singing and demanding to be reigned over, suppressed, controlled over, dictated over. And that energetically has an impact, even though they don't consciously realize that's what they're doing. Just the national anthem, mate, it's not. See, it's lovely. They piss on us and we say it's raining. They piss on us and we say she's frickin' raining. There you go. And I think this guy's made the best statement ever about the Queen. I do. I love it. I think that's brilliant. It's fucking lovely. That's just absolutely perfect. Give that man a knighthood. So, in plain sight, this elite, it's not just arrived in the last few years. There's been a journey. It goes way back further than this, but you can pick it up in this ancient period when these very advanced societies, compared with much of the rest of the world, started to emerge in Mesopotamia, Sumer, Babylon, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and China. And these bloodlines came out of these ancient societies. The Chinese emperors used to claim the right to be emperor because of their genetic descendants from the serpent gods. And this is a major place they came out of, Sumer and Egypt, which became Babylon, which is now Iraq. The fact they're bombing the shit out of this place over and over and over and over again is because it has massive, energetic, I can't go into it now because it's too long even for the time I've got, but it's got massive energetic significance globally. And they're creating massive energetic mayhem there for much deeper reasons than just on the surface. So these bloodlines started moving up into Europe under different names. They became the hierarchy that established Rome and the Roman Empire. Eventually, they started to locate in Britain, and then they had the British Empire. Whenever these bloodlines have focused themselves or located themselves, a freaking empire has followed. We now have the American Empire, though they will not call it that. And eventually, as this virus spreading, this influence spreading, reached a certain global point, we had global Babylon. And global Babylon came when all the European powers, not least the British Empire, went walkabout all over the world, creating all the bloody colonies. And at that point, there was a resistance to the colonies, and they appeared to pull back and let the empires fade. That was only on the surface. What did I say right at the start? The best form of slavery is if you don't tell them. What actually happened is what was left out in those countries when the empires apparently receded were the bloodline under different names, the secret society network which manipulates them and their agents into power, and they've gone on controlling those countries ever since. The United States, major world power on the surface, controlled from Europe on the secret society level of the network. And what they've created, which we have today, is a vast web with the archontic inner sanctum dictating out through these various organizations, which I'll get to as we go through the day, a policy, a global direction of society to more and more centralization of power, more and more control, more and more surveillance, more and more takeover of everything, and more inversion of the natural order. And they have the hidden with the secret societies, the deep secret societies, and then the hidden has a cusp where it meets the seen. And there you see organizations like the Bilderberg Group, the Club of Rome, the Trilateral Commission, and the Council on Foreign Relations in America. And then from the cusp of the hidden meeting the seen, you come out into the real scene, which are countries and agencies of government. And they are making decisions and introducing policies which on the face of it appear to be made on their decision, on their say-so, but where it started was here, coming out from the center of the web. And that's why the same things can happen all over the world at the same time. The virus spreading, that's what it's been. So, we have these apparently different aspects of the hidden and religion operating in isolation. They're not. They're all worshiping the same God. Some know, some don't. It's bloodline Satanists. As I've gone through this 25 years, again and again, when I've followed the trail of people in power, I have found members of secret societies, of course. I have found Satanists, and I've found pedophiles. And those three things come together in ways that I'm going to describe. Behind it is this archontic force, like I say. And the here today, gone tomorrow people, even those that have some awareness of what's happening, they are the gophers that introduce what starts out in the hidden. And Satanists are interacting with these entities. When they talk about, I've talked to Satanists, former Satanists all over the world, who've given me chapter and verse on how it all works. And they are, in these rituals, interacting with these archontic gods, these archontic demonic entities. And what is happening is in the archon realm, where these major satanic rituals are taking place, in the archontic realm, there are rituals taking place. When I say rituals, there is manipulation of energetic fields taking place to mirror the energetic impact of the rituals that are taking place in the satanic ritual within our reality. And what that does is create an energetic sync, an energetic synchronization, which allows these entities, some of them, to slip through like an energetic gateway, vortex, into this reality for these rituals. I've talked to many Satanists who described how these entities have manifested at their rituals because of this reason. They use colors, certain colors, because it's all about frequency and wavelength. They're manipulating energy. And you see these colors again and again in the pomp and ceremony of the the royal family and stuff like that. And this is David Berkowitz, who was the son of serial killer in New York many years ago now. And he said in letters to a Christian minister in jail, yeah, I did it, but I did it on behalf of a satanic coven. And he said this in one of his letters, absolutely spot on. Satanists are peculiar people. They aren't ignorant peasants or semi-literate natives. Rather, their ranks are filled with doctors, lawyers, businessmen, and basically highly responsible citizens. They are not a careless group who are apt to make mistakes, but they are secretive and bonded together by a common need and desire to mete out havoc on society. It was Aleister Crowley who said, I want blasphemy, murder, rape, revolution, anything bad, low vibrational energy, suppress the energetic sea in which we are interacting. And this satanic network goes into politics, it goes into banking, it goes into the media. Of course, not everybody, not even nearly everybody, but key people that are directing society. This is a Swiss banker quoted in a magazine a couple of years ago, 3 years ago now, in the Russian magazine Novy Den. These people, he's talking about bankers, are corrupt, sick in their minds, so sick they are full of vices, and those vices are kept under wraps on their orders. Many are into Satanism. When you go into some banks, you see these satanistic symbols. My God, you do. Like the Rothschild Bank in Zurich. These people are controlled by blackmail because of the weaknesses they have. They have to follow the orders or they will be exposed. They will be destroyed or even killed. And at the top of the list I saw recently in professions of psychopaths were bankers. Now, this bloodline passes through what we call history. And it just so happens, because it's an information field and it's a personality field and it gets people in a certain personality type. This is Vlad Dracul, Vlad the Impaler, who was one of the most famous Satanists ever. He used to impale people and just let them slowly die. And he was a member of something called in its short name, the Royal Court of the Dragon, which started out in ancient Egypt. And he is the man, because he was such a Satanist, that Dracula, the Bram Stoker Dracula, was based upon. It just turns out that she is a descendant of Vlad Dracul through Mary of Teck, her grandmother. And this is how the bloodline comes through, and these are satanic bloodlines. These satanic bloodlines, it's in the blood, it's in the information field. And Prince Charles has actually publicly talked about his genetic descendants from Vlad Dracul in Transylvania. So they're descendants of Dracula. I see the likeness. I do. I see the frickin' likeness. I'm not sure about him, mind. I'm not sure he's one of them. Lucky boy, I say. And then you go across the Atlantic. These are descendants of Vlad Dracul. No wonder they have no empathy. They go doing their satanic rituals at places like Bohemian Grove in Northern California, worshipping a 40-foot stone owl, the implications and symbolic nature of which will be coming along. All these people, this is Moloch, one of the ancient gods that they used to, in the Bible it talks about sacrificing children through fire to Moloch. That's Moloch. And what we're seeing, talk about entrainment, where you can be pulled into a frequency and that frequency starts to influence you. All over the place now you're seeing satanic imagery. In Grammys go satanic, the satanic stage shows, videos, and all that stuff. Here's the Thriller. It was all about kind of Satanism with the serpent eyes with Michael Jackson. They making vampires sexy through things like Twilight. Then we have Halloween, we're just coming up to, Satanism Light. It's pulling people in. The real Halloween sees phenomenal numbers of children and others, but children sacrificed all over the world. It's one of the great satanic ritual days. And now they've got kids turning it into a form of Christmas, which is another form of their ritual, which I'll come to later. And the real trick or treat was when the Druids knocked on people's doors and demanded a sacrifice of a girl, and then, sacrificed her, killed her, and burnt her on the bone fire, where bonfire comes from. And now we're having kids do it. trick or treating. It's pulling kids into this frequency. And here we have in America a satanic temple to distribute materials to school children in Florida. And there was an Australian Satanist who, just before he died, wrote a long document about Satanism and its influence, not as an apology, he supported it. And one of the things he said was that they do rituals on particular points on the Earth's energy field, particularly powerful vortexes, and they do their really dark, horrific rituals because they are seeking to lower the vibrational frequency of the energy field, the energy sea in which we interrelate. And this is what he said. What is most people do not realize is that Satanism is a ritually based practice, and that this repetition has over time left strong impressions upon the morphic field. Control the sea and you control the fish. It's all about frequency suppression to keep us in density and out of multi-level connection. So religion is Satanism light. It's like a public version of it if you look at the rituals. The people who worship the gods of the major religions are worshiping these entities under different names. But they all call them God, but they're actually these entities. Come more to that as we go along. And that's why you see this universal religion. There's virgin mothers and babies all over the frickin' world. I mean, where do you look? It's like a franchise. All over. And yet Christianity picks it up. It's the one. It's not. It's just another one of the ancient religion. I mean, this is Satanism light when they're eating the body of Christ as a frickin' biscuit and drinking his blood as a bottle of Merlot. I mean, frickin' hell. But it's what they do in reality in Satanism. It's Satanism light. What a bloody image on which to base a religion. What is that going to do to you, focusing on that? That's sacrifice. There's an inverted pentagram from a major clergyman in the bloody Church of England. And all religion to me is a form of bloody madness because it's so squeezing the perception of possibility that you only need what it says between these two covers to understand the friggin' world, even though you don't even understand the friggin' book. And so, boom, all that's gone. You can't think that, you won't be one of us. Bloody good. And then you got people kind of going through this every year because Jesus did. And because some mate of bloody Mohammed was cut up hundreds of years ago, they do it on the day it's supposed to have happened every year. It's freaking insanity. Religion summed up. Eskimo. If I didn't know about God and sin, would I go to hell? Priest. No, not if you didn't know. Well, why didn't you tell me? I mean, that's it, innit? Did I say the world was mad? I might have mentioned it. Religion, you couldn't make it up. Oh, sorry, they did. They did. They did. Yes, look, he's going away to condemn gay marriage, look, you know what I mean? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And look where these major religions came from. These major points that I told you the bloodlines came out of. When you look at Sumer, Babylon, Egypt, out of there came Judaism, came Christianity, came Islam, came many other of these sub-religions. And as this guy said, Robert Ingersoll, there can be but little liberty on earth while men worship a tyrant in heaven. The question is, given the Gnostic writings and the other information from cultures galore, what is the nature of that tyrant in so-called heaven? Now, into this mix comes this. I said earlier that when I investigate people in power, invariably, not all the time, but invariably, you come over secret societies, Satanism, and pedophilia. There's a reason for that, and it fits into what I'm talking about. In 1998, I put this book out, The Biggest Secret, which exposed former Prime Minister Ted Heath as a Satanist, child-killing, child-sacrificing, child-torturing pedophile. 1998, and Lord McAlpine too. Nobody said anything. A journalist read the passage to Ted Heath days after it was published. Nothing happened. Why? Because it was true. And when Lord McAlpine was suing all and sundry for not naming him, hundreds of thousands of pounds for BBC, didn't name him. Hundreds of thousands of pounds, ITV, didn't name him. Goes for the Speaker's wife. Goes for some comedian on the friggin' Twitter. In my book, I said what he was, and on my website, again, while he's suing all and sundry for not naming him. And now it's blowing fricking open, and they are desperately trying to put the lid on. Pedophilia is absolutely infesting the establishment at multiple levels, right to what they allege is the top, for reasons I'll come to. All over the world is the same. The number of children being abused by the rich and famous, never mind others, is absolutely staggering, and there's a reason for it. The scale of child abuse worldwide, shocking beyond belief. Yes, this is the question. We need to keep asking about everything. Why? Then you might find answers. Why is Satanism and pedophilia so interrelated and interconnected? Well, this is a Central American shaman, Don Juan Matos, who said this about entities, the archons that he called the flyers, describe him in the same way, feeding off the energy of children. Sorcerers, people who can see beyond the physical, see infant human beings as strange luminous balls of energy, covered from top to bottom with a glowing coat, something like a coat of plastic adjusted tightly around the cocoon of energy. The glowing coat of awareness is what the predators consume, and when a human reached adulthood, all that is left of that fringe awareness is a narrow fringe that goes from the ground to the top of the toes. That fringe permits mankind to keep living, but only barely. What they are after is the energy of children before puberty. We see puberty as a hormonal chemical change. That is merely a holographic expression of an energetic change in the waveform information field. They want that energy before that change takes place. And so these pedophiles are possessed by these entities that stimulate the desire for sex with children, and while it's happening, they are, through the vehicle of the pedophile, drawing off the child's energy. And the reason that you have so many pedophiles in the upper echelons of society, he said advisedly, is because they are the bloodlines, the dual DNA bloodlines, most possessible, most possessed, and therefore the best vehicles for feeding off children by these entities. That Australian Satanist said this in that document: politicians are introduced by a carefully graded set of criteria and situations that enable them to accept that their victims will be our little secret. Young children sexually molested and physically abused by politicians worldwide are quickly used as sacrifices. In Australia, the bodies are hardly ever discovered, for Australia is still a wilderness. And this is what is going on. This is what Ted Heath was doing. And this is why this guy got away with it all those decades. He was supplying children to the rich and famous, and if he went down, they all went down. That's why he was never prosecuted, even though they knew what he was doing. He is a doorway to the cesspit, because he was the doorway to so many of the rich and famous, the archontic hybrid bloodlines that were feeding off the energy of children thanks to him. Daily Express, Jimmy Savile was part of a satanic ring, stands back in amazement. Of course, because they're interrelated. Knighthood from the Queen, she didn't bloody know. Come to that in a minute. Knighthood from the Pope, no need for amazement. Roman Catholic Church, and I tell you what, the reason he became the first Pope in 600 years to resign in office will be shown eventually to be related to this subject, among others. So, we've got all these kind of pedophiles, famous pedophiles. Thomas Hamilton, the guy who killed all those kids in Dunblane, he was a pedophile and supplier of children to the rich and famous in Scotland. Ted Heath I've talked about, George Bush have come to him, Kissinger. And this man, Lord Mountbatten, member of the royal family, of course inner royal family, was a known paedophile. And who did Jimmy Savile say publicly, not in this context of course, introduced him into the inner circle of the royal family in the 1960s? Lord Mountbatten, the mentor of Prince Charles and Prince Philip. And close to the royal family ever since, decade after decade after decade. The frickin' Yorkshire police knew what he was doing. They didn't bloody know. Are you having a laugh? When are these bloody police officers going to get their asses in gear and start knocking on Buckingham Palace? Why was record-breaking paedophile and child procurer Savile an inner circle royal buddy for decades? I knew about him in 1998 when a close friend of Diana for 9 years before they fell out, called Christine Fitzgerald, told me all about him and his necrophilia, sex with dead bodies, death cult. That's why he volunteered to be a porter in a hospital, so he got to the mortuary. And she said Diana thought he was a sleazy man. She couldn't stand him. But he said, when asked, why are you on the inner circle of the royal family? I get things done and I work deep cover. Bloody hell he did. Bloody right he did. And that's why his back was always covered. Who, what, where, when, and with whom? The reason they're desperately trying to put the lid on this is very simple. When the truth comes out about all this, the political and royal establishment will collapse. That's why they're trying to do it. He was supplying children to Ted Heath, not least out of the children's home in Jersey when he went over to Jersey in one of his yachts, Morning Cloud, one of many called Morning Cloud. This has come out through other people now. And even the bloody Daily Mail accepted at one point, when all this was breaking, that Margaret Thatcher knew that there was a paedophile ring, or at least paedophiles in her inner circle, and she did nothing. Who was a close friend of Margaret Thatcher? Jimmy frickin' Savile. This was a close aide, Peter Morrison, from when she became Conservative leader in 75 right through to when she left as Prime Minister in 1990. Known paedophile. Even Edwina Currie, the former Thatcher minister, said so in her diaries. And so have others come out within the Conservative Party. He, Lord McAlpine, was her Svengali inner circle advisor all the way through the same period that he was our other close aide. And her Home Secretary, Leon Britton, the man who lost the dossier from Geoffrey Dickens, the MP, the late MP, that was exposing the political paedophilia and naming names. In America, this guy, I've named this guy for bloody hell, how long now? Way back into the 90s. Child killer, child abuser, child torturer. Said it on American radio endless times, in books endless times. And yet he's still at large. And, you know, MI5, excuse that with Special Branch, I can't take these bleeding seriously. MI5 Special Branch, right? You can't cough close to the royal family without they've done a massive check on you. And they didn't know about Savile. The NSA, the CIA, they don't know about Bush and all the rest of them. What did the CIA do in response to Bush being a child killer? They named their headquarters after him. Here you go, this is the Political Paedophile Investigation Squad. This is the Political Paedophile Protection Unit. And we keep coming back to the big picture. These are protected because paedophilia has to be protected because of its energetic significance to that which controls the system from the unseen. So Geoffrey Dickens, he had this dossier which he gave to this guy. He's a nice bloody man, isn't he? Now, one of my sources was Andrea Davison. She was a lady that represented the abused at the North Wales inquiry, care home inquiry. Care home, what a joke. And she worked, was an operative within British intelligence. I met her in the 90s. Lovely lady. And she's now on the run in South America because they fitted her up for a crime that appears not only she didn't do, but actually never took place. And the judge, who in her absence, because she had new people and got her out of the country, the judge that awarded a jail sentence was the lawyer representing the famous names seeking not to be named in the North Wales inquiry, while she was representing the victims, and he never said what his connection to her was when he was the judge making the fricking sentence. And he gave her some of the infamous Dickens dossier with the names on. And her house was raided by North Wales and Derbyshire police, who took it away never to be seen again. It's a massive fricking cover-up. Here you go. Oh shit, right, usual strategy, order an inquiry and make it, go nowhere, sorted. Except that it wasn't. Here you go, we'll leave no stone unturned except for those with our people underneath. So, anyone want blatant evidence that it's a cover-up? To investigate what happened to the dossier and political paedophilia and Downing Street paedophile rings, they appoint to head the inquiry the sister of Lord Havers, known paedophile, who was the Attorney General who helped to cover up the frickin' paedophilia in politics at the same time that he was Home Secretary. 60 million people, and that's all they can bloody come up with. And then when a lot of us who kind of understand this started putting out the fact that this was all going on, Daily Mail, to their credit, picked it up and made a big splash about it. She had to step down. And so who did they say in her place? The Lord Mayor, Fiona Woolf, 60 million bloody people plus, and they can't find anyone that doesn't live in his frickin' street and has dinner with him. What? How much evidence do people need? How much evidence do the media need that this is the most blatant cover-up because the establishment would fall and the monarchy would be fricking history if this came out? Protect the kids, no, protect the archontic abusers. So all these different areas of the system, ultimately, through the hierarchy, end up there. And their great language is the language of symbolism. Interestingly, reptiles communicate through imagery rather than other forms of communication, apparently, I was reading recently. The language of symbols. Why? Why do they have this symbolic language? Well, Confucius once said, signs and symbols rule the world, not words or laws, and there's a reason for that. Because a symbol, like everything else, is just an information field carrying the information that it represents. Going to give you a number of examples as we go along here about this. And so, a symbol, we see it as a symbol, yeah, but that's the hologram, that's in the hologram. It's actually a vibrating information field, which enters the eyes. But it enters the eyes without fanfare. I can be looking at a symbol, I might not even know I'm looking at a symbol. I might be subconsciously looking at a symbol because it's just in my eye line and I'm not aware of it. But I'm taking in on a subconscious level that information field. But I don't know I am. Whereas when you're getting communication to the ear, it's still a vibrating information field, what we call sound. But if it's within the audio range of the ear, you know you're receiving it, unless it's below threshold, subliminal. So the greatest way of getting information into the mind, into the brain, into the subconscious to influence perception is through the eyes, because you don't take it in. It's almost entirely subconscious. Look at that figure right at the start of the day. 11 million sensations a second, and the brain takes 40. But the subconscious takes the freaking lot. That's the point. And so symbols, the information in symbols, is a gateway to the subconscious mind, which eventually filters through to the conscious mind and starts to influence actions. And when you focus on a symbol, you are, through entrainment, syncing your energetic field with what the symbol represents. Doesn't matter if you have a misguided idea of what you think it represents. What it actually represents dictates the frequency, and therefore, when you sync with it, there will be an energetic connection through the symbol to that which it represents, because the frequencies are the same. So when you're focused on that, that's taking you into a certain low vibrational frequency. I mean, like I said, a symbol of a religion. Energy flows where attention goes. So if you can get people involved in rituals or anything that involves symbols and you put their attention on it, you are connecting them energetically, frequency-wise, to what that represents. And, you know, sportsmen will say that when there's a big crowd and they're all on their side, willing them to win, they get energy from them. Why? Because the focus of the crowd on who they want to win makes an energetic connection with the person, and they start to feed more energy from the crowd. But it goes the other way too. When massive crowds focus on the symbols of this archontic force, whether it's personification or literal symbols, they're making the energetic connection, and their energy can be trawled because there is a frequency connection. And when you have these massive, massive rituals with unbelievable numbers of people, they're trawling energy. Go to a football match with a massively powerful atmosphere, and the hairs at the back of your neck stand up. Why? Because of the electromagnetic field generated by the crowd. That electromagnetic field en masse is what these people trawl. When you go to like Mecca and they're focusing on this, and we'll come to what that is shortly, what that represents is creating a frequency connection through what that represents to what that actually is. When they focus on Mecca, they're focusing on that Kaaba cube, and there are consequences energetically for that. When you have a satanic stage show, and the crowd, the kids are focused on it, what it's doing is locking them into that frequency. Entrainment. So there's so many ways that we are fed off in that way. And symbols is a massive way. Of course, the eye is a universal symbol of this network. There you see the eye on the necklace of the mysteries. It goes way, way back. In banking and politics, in church, in state, you see it. This is thousands of years old, found in Ecuador. And there is the eye and the 13 levels of the pyramid. And under ultraviolet light, that even shines the illuminated eye. And that's what you find on the dollar bill. It's one of the major symbols of this archontic network. And there's 13 levels, exactly as in Ecuador thousands of years ago. There it is in Freemasonry, because you'll find it in Satanism, you'll find it in Freemasonry, you'll find it in banking, you'll find it in politics, because they all ultimately are worshiping the same gods. That's MI5. There it is again, the security agencies. MI6, again, the pyramidal shape. This is a church. I think it's in Poland. And here we go, old twerper's back. There you go, have a twerp. Stage show, there it is, classic. And these are locking people in. There's Madonna. What's the chances of this? Katy Perry, Angelina Jolie, Lady Gaga, CBS, Jay-Z. Unbelievable. What's the chances of Chancellor Merkel doing that every time? That's bloody ludicrous. It's not even a natural thing to do. And then you look, I mean, this is unbelievable, this. Animated bloody cartoons and stuff. This pyramid and all-seeing eyes freaking everywhere. I'm not going to go through them all because of time, but every one of the shots that you're going to see has got that in it. Look at them, all over the bloody place. And this is feeding something into the subconscious of those who watch, overwhelmingly kids. The programming starts subconsciously from the earliest age. Like the Olympics in 2012, the one-eyed man, the eye. Here you had the Monsters, Inc. The central character had a single eye, and the monsters were feeding off the energy of children. It was their sustenance. And then you have this is unbelievable again, the number of personalities who get photographed covering one freaking eye up in some form. I mean, look at it. And there's hundreds more. And most of them won't know. Another great symbol of this archontic network in all its forms is the flame or the lighted torch. And what the Gnostic said was that the archons are made from luminous fire, the jinn were made from smokeless fire, according to the Islamic belief, and the archon phoenix, that all comes from this archontic symbolism, the phoenix rising from the ashes in fire. And according to Freemasonic historians, the phoenix morphed in terms of symbolism into the more acceptable eagle, and that's why you have eagles on so many flags and state logos. So all this is putting information into the subconscious mind to filter through to the conscious mind. So, in plain sight, Saturn. Saturn is, I would say, after my research over the years, is fundamental to understanding how this, quote, bad copy became our fake reality and continues to be so. First of all, Saturn was widely worshipped in the ancient world. Question, why would it be when we can hardly frickin' see it, never mind what the ancients could do? Well, there's a story about why. This, as we see it today, wasn't always like it was, and in geologically very recent times, it wasn't like this. People like Immanuel Velikovsky and others have studied over the years and written books, and they've been followed up by people like the Electric Universe researchers like David Talbot and Thornhill in books more recently, as they have looked at the evidence that there was a catastrophic upheaval in the solar system in the relatively recent past, not yesterday afternoon, but the relatively recent past, which could well sync with when this bad copy fake reality was locked in. All over the world you have global destruction myths and catastrophe myths manifesting under names like Atlantis and Lemuria and Mu, but they are unbelievable in their common themes of how they describe what happens. And after this movement of planets, which was a massive disruption of the electromagnetic order, as I mentioned earlier, which meant the stability had gone, they ended up where we see them today. Now, this is a fantastic book. I almost can't get it now, and if you can, it costs a fortune. But it represents a magnificent piece of research by this man, David Talbot, one of the people involved in the Electric Universe information. It's called the Saturn myth. And what he did was study the worship of Saturn all over the world, studied its symbolism, studied what they said about it, studied why they said they worshiped Saturn. And what came out was this, that Saturn, once upon a time, was anywhere but where it is now, and at the time it had no rings. Come to that as we go along. Actually, it was the dominant planet, I would say star, sun, in the Earth sky. And the way they describe it, it went around in an orbit in sync with Mars and Venus as it moved around. And that was the dominant light, the dominant sun, if you like, from Earth in the Golden Age. And I say that Saturn is a dwarf star, which is not a great, amazing thing because there's so many dwarf stars out there, they say now, it's unbelievable. And what they said in the early astronomical traditions is that Saturn was the primeval sun. That's how they described it. And Plato referred to Saturn as Helios, the sun god. Not our sun that we see today, the Saturn sun, referred to as Helios. Now, we take Helios to mean our sun, because it's the sun god. I say that's a mistake. Actually, they were talking about Saturn. And Diodorus of Sicily, an ancient historian, reported that the Chaldeans in the same area, Sumer, Babylon, now Iraq, called Saturn by the name Helios and said that this was because Saturn was, quote, the most conspicuous of the planets, which fits exactly with Talbot's research across and I tell you, it's across the global cultures. The creator of modern Christianity worshipped Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. Sol, it turns out, was another name that was used for Saturn and not the sun we think we see today. So when you start to let it kind of filter through, that at least most of the ancient sun gods were referring to the Saturn sun, not the sun we see today. That would make Heliopolis, famous city of the sun in ancient Egypt, as the city of Saturn, with the obelisks, the pillars outside the temple in Heliopolis. And that relates so closely to Solomon's temple, the mythical Solomon's temple. Every syllable of Solomon means the sun. Question now is which sun? And again, you've got the two pillars outside, just as with the one in Heliopolis. Then you come to Freemasonry, and its temples have the twin pillars worshipping the sun, the Saturn sun. Come to that as we go along. So when you go in this symbol, absolutely obsessed network, you come to the twin towers, the twin pillars. A coincidence? No chance. And what are the chances of this if that is the Saturn sun, Helios, Heliopolis? This obelisk in St. Peter's Square is an original obelisk put there from Heliopolis, I would say the city of the Saturn sun. And I've been saying for years and years and years and years that the Roman church is worshipping Saturn. The Bennu bird of Heliopolis was symbolized as Atum Ra. Both symbolized Saturn. And the Bennu bird became the phoenix, which became the eagle, as Freemasonic historians talk about. They worship Saturn as the old sun, the dark lord, and the lord of the rings. Later, Satanism is Saturnism. And it's also symbolized as an eye. Now, what Talbot concluded from reading all these accounts of what happened to Saturn was this, that during these catastrophes, this is a quote from his book, the subject of the global creation legend, the global catastrophe legend, is a spectacular cosmic event actually witnessed by the ancients. Massive quantities of cosmic debris exploded from Saturn, clouding the heavens and eventually congealing into a vast band around the planet. Now, the band is described, like he said, as around the planet. However, what is described is the reflection onto that band of the sun we have today, made it seem from Earth as if there was only part of it, like a beard. And as the day moved on and the sun's angle moved, it's described as appearing that this band went around Saturn, as I'll explain. Now, this is one of Saturn's moons, and I only put this up here because it shows this light behind it. Now, the source of this light is not the same as I'm talking about, but it just gives a feel today, looking at that angle of that Saturn moon, of what it must have looked like in the way they described from Earth. This band, this luminous band. And what they said is, as the sun moved round its angle in relation to Saturn, it appeared from Earth that this was moving around the around Saturn. But that became the main symbol because that appears to be what it looked like for most of the Earth day at that time. And so you see symbols relating to that all over the ancient world, which Talbot came up with. Let's just go further forward here, I'll come to something else. There's loads of them with the band and the disk Saturn. Loads of them like this, with symbolizes the horns with the planet, the sun in the middle of it. And Lord of the Rings was a name given to Saturn. And here you see in the movie, you see the same symbol and the eye of Sauron, the reptilian eye as the source of power. They're using it now in Apple products as well. Here you have the man who started a satanic secret society in Germany called the Brotherhood of Saturn. And these are Saturn symbols, and there you see the round circle with the dot in the middle and the horns. Now that round circle with the dot in the middle is said today still to have been an ancient symbol of the sun. Well, there's nothing when you look at our sun to use a symbol like that to symbolize it. But you look at that symbol in relation to what Talbot's saying, and it's very obvious what it was symbolizing. You had an unbelievably Saturn-esque stage show done at the Super Bowl in 2012 by Madonna with the luminous fiery eye again. And there is Saturn with the crescent between the Twin Towers in the Mother Lodge of Freemasonry in Great Queen Street in London. You look at the symbol of Islam, and it can be interpreted as the star and the crescent that was used in the ancient world. These laurel leaves symbols are very much in sympathy with that. This, of course, is the United Nations with the world as a target, very appropriate, and that is the symbol of the Windsors, the royal family, the Windsors royal family. That's, of course, an American great what do you call it? There's the flying disc, again, a Saturn symbol. You see that on many cars and in many areas of the corporate world. And of course, in that Saturn-esque presentation, you had exactly that used in the Madonna stage show. Now this is why Satanists worship the goat. In one form, the goat god Pan. This is Manly P. Hall, Secret Teachings of All Ages, who is one of the major Freemasonic historians over the years. He said Pan was a composite creature, the upper part, with the exception of his horns, being human, and the lower part in the form of a goat. The god himself is a symbol of Saturn because this planet is enthroned in Capricorn, whose emblem is a goat. And that is where that comes from, Baphomet, one of the most famous of satanic worshipping symbols. And you see them on this ring. Is Baphomet on Beyonce. She's dressed, Lady Gaga, as Baphomet. And there is Baroness Philippine de Rothschild with Baphomet massively round her neck. I am staggered, I don't believe it. The owl is Saturn, the owl of Bohemian Grove. Apis or Apis, the Egyptian Saturn god, the bull god, the god of Saturn. And that's where you get the golden calf and all that stuff. And again, you've got the money system symbolized as the bull as well. Now, I said earlier that numbers are just digital expressions of frequency waveform information fields. This is called the magic square of Saturn, and it's also the magic square of Freemasonry, of course. And why it's magic is whatever way you go and you add those numbers up, they come to 15. Don't matter which way you go. Now, in numerology, you add the numbers until you get a single number. So 15 in numerology is 6, 666. 666. And that represents the energy frequency of Saturn, which I'll come to. Now, this is the sigil of Saturn, and they get it by drawing between the squares of the magic square from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. And that's how they get that. Now, if you turn that up on its side, you get that, which is what that is. The most obvious symbol of Freemasonry, because they're worshipping Saturn, which is an expression of this archontic fake reality. That is the symbol of Balmoral, the Scottish home of the royal family. Exactly the same, the sigil of Saturn. This is an ancient symbol of Saturn, the six-pointed star, the Star of David. It's not, they just hijacked that. It's a symbol of Saturn going way, way back. And this is where the name Rothschild came from. They had a red version of the six-pointed star on their house in Frankfurt, where the Rothschild dynasty came out of. And in German, red shield is Rothschild. The very name Rothschild comes from a symbol of Saturn. And they then took it and put it on their fiefdom of Israel. Saturn. Same with many law enforcement symbols. There it is as an ancient depiction of Saturn, six-pointed star and the moons. There's the six-pointed star on this necklace of the mysteries. And here it is again. And all of these are from Asia. It is not a unique Jewish symbol. The Rothschilds took it as a symbol of Saturn and put it as a Jewish symbol. No one is more manipulated by the Rothschilds than the Jewish people of the world. No one. And here you have it in Christianity, the six-pointed star, and the ex-pope. And there it is between the pillars in the Mother Lodge of Freemasonry in Great Queen Street in London. It's all Saturn. They're all pissing in the same pot, all of them. Now, another ancient symbol of Saturn is the black cube, which you see all over the place. And this is interesting. We're going to get in now into how this matrix actually works. This is a permanent hexagon storm in the North Pole of Saturn. It's 2 Earths wide, and it's going all the time, and it rotates exactly in sync with Saturn's radio emissions. And in geometry, the hexagon is also the six-pointed star, and is also the cube. They are different expressions of the same energetic state. And so when you look at this is just a crop circle, but that's coincidental. You look at that crop circle, and it's a hexagon, a flat hexagon. Look at it again, but see it three-dimensionally, even though it's exactly the same picture, and it becomes a cube. They are different expressions of the same energetic state. So a hexagon is also a cube, is also a six-pointed star in geometry. And therefore, this cube, the Kaaba at Mecca, is a symbol of Saturn, and that's what they're worshipping, though they don't realize it, though the inner circle will. The black cube that Jewish people put on their third eye as part of their ritual is Saturn. And when they worship at Mecca, they even make them sit in concentric bloody circles. They'll have them going round next. And so when they are doing their circling of that symbol of Saturn, that which is that frequency can feed off it. This is the symbol of Saturn in terms of astrology. And this is the symbol of the Soviet Union, which was created by the Rothschilds. The symbol of Saturn, the hammer and the sickle. Sickle become relevant shortly. In fact, now. This is the ancient Greek god of Saturn called Kronos, the bearded man, holding the scythe. And Kronos is Father Time with the scythe and the beard. Chronos, chronology, time, It's where it comes from. It's going somewhere. Saturn is the god of space and time, so it is said. Crown comes from Kronos, the god of Saturn in ancient Greece. The Grim Reaper is Saturn with the scythe, the death cult, exactly. Then you've got El and the Elohim. El is the Jewish god or the Hebrew god of Saturn. I would say El and the Elohim in the biblical realm is Demiurge and the archons. And you have archangels, Michael, Gabriel. The El goes all over the place. We have elections where the pawns are elected to serve the elite. We have Israel. And that is the symbol of El, the black cube. It's Saturn. The black sun, the dark lord, the demiurge, Saturn, Kronos, Satan. They're all different ways of saying the same thing. Then you have the bearded man. The god is always kind of symbolized with a beard. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from Kronos, the bearded man who is the god of Saturn. You see beards in religions all over the flipping place. And the beard comes from this symbolism of Saturn with the luminous crescent. And so we come to probably the most famous bearded man, the Saturn pattern. Well, hello from Rome. This guy comes from Rome and the worship of Saturn. This is Fritz Springmeier, a very accomplished researcher into all this. Saturn is an important key to understanding the long heritage this conspiracy has back to antiquity. The city of Rome was originally known as Saturnia, or the city of Saturn. The Roman Catholic Church retains much of the Saturn worship, hence Heliopolis obelisk, in its ritual. Saturn also relates to Lucifer in various occult dictionaries. Saturn is associated with evil. And Saturnalia, the 5th century Roman writer Theodosius said that Saturnalia, which was in Rome running up to our Christmas, was to mark the time when Saturn suddenly disappeared, which fits with that catastrophe story that Talbot talks about. So Saturnalia, that is the ruins of the temple of Saturn in Rome today, is actually Christmas. They decorated trees, they gave presents to each other, they used holly, same thing. And Santa is an anagram of Satan, Saturnalia, it's Kronos, the Saturn god. Now the bearded man is often used for Saturn. This is William Blake, who was a very deep thinker and knew a lot of inside information. And he painted this picture in 1794 called Ancient of Days. Ancient of Days is one of the phrases used in the Bible to describe God. And he depicts him as the architect. This is on the GE building in Rockefeller Plaza in New York. Again, the Ancient of Days, which I say is the demiurge Saturn, the architect. Freemasons call their God the great architect of the universe. The demiurge was called by the Gnostics the great architect of the universe. And in the Matrix, we had the architect creating the fake reality, the bearded man. And when you look at Saturn, the control system, it fits all the boxes of the society we live in. The religions, secret societies, and Satanism are worshipping Saturn. Astrologically, in other words, energetically, banking is astrologically ruled by Saturn. Politics and the institutions of state of all levels astrologically ruled by Saturn. Corporations astrologically ruled by Saturn. Law in the court system astrologically ruled by Saturn. Science astrologically ruled by Saturn. And it's amazing that the left side of the brain and the traits of it, and the Saturnian traits and the reptilian brain traits are remarkably the same. So all these different parts of the human institutions of society are Saturn's little helpers. The vast majority not knowing, the inner circle absolutely knowing. All this court symbolism and religious symbolism and the headgear in education, it's all Saturn. And you see it endlessly in corporate logos. Now, Jordan Maxwell has been talking about Saturn symbolism being all over society for decades and decades and decades and decades. My question is, why? Why is Saturn symbolism everywhere? Why is it worshipped by all these people? There has to be a reason. Well, I think this is the reason after what I put together. The Saturn moon matrix. The Gnostics said of the archons, they make something appear to happen that does not actually happen. They can induce virtual reality experience. And they say of the jinn in Islamic belief, manipulate humans by creating illusions. I went into this subway station in New York a few years ago and saw this painted on the floor, and I thought, that's extraordinary. You had the eye and the ring, Saturn, and over the world was this broadcast system, basically. And it started a train of perception and research. And again, we go back, do we live in a simulation? What is the archon illusion that's given us this fake reality compared with the one that was before? What is making us decode a different reality now to the one we did before? And it seems to me that Saturn is fundamentally part of this fake matrix that we call the world, and that part of what it does is act as a firewall from the original reality so we don't decode it, just like they do in China to stop people getting great tracts of the internet. Interestingly, the Gnostics say the outermost planetary sphere or archon of the matrix, I say, was Saturn. Beyond that was Leviathan, a snake swallowing its own tail called the Ouroboros. Souls had to pass through this to reach paradise. There was another esoteric concept called the ring pass not. And this is a point where while you remain in the illusion of duality, you can't progress beyond it, called the Ouroboros, the snake swallowing its tail. And there on that Saturn symbol, you see the Ouroboros in the Mother Lodge of Freemasonry, exactly what the Gnostics described. And within that reality is what we call time, the great controlling mechanism, Chronos, and Saturn, the god of time and space. Now, coming from Saturn is a particular frequency, and it's the frequency that's making that storm at the North Pole. And this is Saturn, which is recorded by NASA. Nice, man. And what the Saturn rings are they're made of sound. I had this sent to me by a sound engineer. This is a ring of Saturn from a particular angle. And he said, I see that every day. That is sound. And there's a thing called cymatics, which is creating patterns purely by sound, where they put kind of particles on a metal plate, and then they play sound across, and the sound, which is an information source, makes the patterns move into a certain sequence. And as the sound changes, the pattern, the sequence, the symbol changes. And it seems the higher the frequency, the more complex the patterns. So sound is a vehicle for delivering information that creates form. And this is a cymatic symbol, the six-pointed star, created purely by a particular sound. And that's what that is, and that's why it rotates exactly with the radio frequencies of Saturn. This is a standing sound wave, and it's an eye storm at the south pole of Saturn, which is permanently going round, and will do so while the sound coming from Saturn is that sound and that frequency. There's a standing wave, looks like an eye, done in a studio. This is the standing wave of rings done in a studio, just like Saturn. It's all sound. Now, these symbols here, I got off the internet, and what it is, they're playing through really fast. You can't see what the symbols are, but when you freeze frame them, what they are, they're reacting to sound. And when you freeze frame them, suddenly you see the symbols that are appearing very fast, but you can't see with the naked eye. There's a six-pointed star in one of them. There's a hexagon. And so a symbol is an expression of a sound, and a sound is an expression of a symbol. So all these symbols and this magic square numerologically of the magic square of Saturn are all representations of the frequency of Saturn, and when they interact with our subconscious, they're locking us into the frequency of Saturn from all over the place. A sound wave creates a symbol, and a symbol generates a sound wave, although we won't be able to hear it in our range. So when you see these artistic patterns in churches and stuff, we see them as patterns, but they're actually a representation of sound frequency. So on an inaudible level, they're giving it off. And Saturn is, therefore, I suggest, a major part of the broadcasting of this fake reality, which we are decoding into a world we think is real, but is actually fake. And maybe that was the pineal gland once. And maybe now that's Saturn, which has hijacked the pineal gland. So Saturn was ringless, according to the ancients, before this great catastrophe. So where did the bloody rings come from? This man, Norman Berggren, has a long, long history. He's in his 90s now, of working in high-tech space and missiles and NASA and all the rest of it. And he wrote a book some years ago called The Ringmakers of Saturn, because when he studied pictures of the rings, he realized they were changing, and not only changing, they were being made as you looked at the pictures. This Voyager spacecraft went closest to Saturn in 1980, and then there's the Cassini craft, which arrived in 2004, and I think it's still in the area. And when he compared pictures from both of them, and then compared pictures in relation to the other, he realized that the story of Saturn was very different to the one he thought and he'd been told. He said this in his book: several years ago, a number of folks in the astronomy and physics world began to theorizing that these rings had to be much younger than the universe, perhaps only about 100 million years old. But one pair of pictures shows a change in 5 minutes. An impression is conveyed that the latest reported measurements purport to be the true ones, when in reality all might be quite nearly correct at the time of observation, but general reluctance to accept variable ring system geometry occurs because of the apparent failure to identify a physical mechanism suitable for producing recurrent change. In other words, because they can't explain why it's changing, they'll just deny it's bloody changing. And on the pictures, and NASA has these pictures, he saw these, what he calls electromagnetic vehicles. And these are thousands of miles long, some of them. And if anyone thinks that's fantastic, that's the Earth in relation to Saturn. We're not talking about the same relationship to size. And there's loads of them on these pictures. These electromagnetic vehicles, he calls them, all over the place. Here's one pictured next to the rings by the Hubble telescope. Here's a few NASA pictures showing one of them apparently moving. You put the pictures together. Why have we never heard of these except through Norman Berggren? And then he found pictures where these electromagnetic vehicles went into the rings, and all this stuff was coming out of them that were making the rings as he was looking through the pictures. They're not natural. They say the water ice and stuff is in the rings. I reckon you'll probably find that there's a certain crystal in the rings that is generating the frequency. And this is from just a couple of weeks ago. The mysteries of Saturn's expanding F ring. Saturn's most distant ring is twice as bright and 3 times as wide as it was during the Voyager flybys in 1980 and 81. The great mystery of Saturn's rings, how they formed, why are they like that, we don't know. Well, maybe we do. There's this massive ring that was found in 2009, about 3.7 million miles out from Saturn, but around Saturn. Get 1 billion Earths in it. And I'm suggesting that actually that broadcast comes across to us. The Saturn matrix is a band of frequency which we are tuned to, and we think it's real. It's a virtual reality as described by the Gnostics. Now, I'm going to move on quickly because we want to run out of time, but the moon, as I've said before, is fundamentally involved in this. I read this book, Who Built the Moon? The evidence for the fact the moon is not a natural body is fantastic. And interestingly, what the book found was the relationship in terms of mathematics and all the rest of it of the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun is completely different to anything else in the solar system. And what the Gnostics said was the archons created the rest of the solar system but did not create this. The maths involved in the Earth, Moon, Sun system is nothing less than staggering. They've been put together with the accuracy of the proverbial Swiss watchmaker, the book said. That's why the Moon is about the same size as the Sun, almost exactly at the time of an eclipse. And the Moon is perfectly placed, said this BBC documentary, to sustain life, but that's pure luck, a cosmic coincidence. I don't think it is. We never see the other side of the Moon. We only see one side of it. And they say in the book, the Moon is bigger than it should be, apparently older than it should be, and much lighter than in mass than it should be. It occupies an unlikely orbit and is so extraordinary that all existing explanations for its presence are fraught with difficulties, and none of them could be considered remotely watertight. They've got no idea. They first of all had the whack theory, something like a Mars-type planet whacked into the Earth and bits became the Moon. That didn't work out. They had the double whack theory where it came back and had another go, and so they go on. And these scientists saying here, the best explanation for the Moon is observational error. The Moon doesn't exist because it shouldn't if it's natural. It seems easier to explain the non-existence of the Moon than its existence. And they've smacked the Moon a number of times with massive explosions and impacts. And what's come from that is the evidence says the Moon is actually hollow. This is NASA scientist, again, Gordon MacDonald. It would seem that the Moon is more like a hollow than a homogeneous sphere. This man from MIT said the lunar orbiter experiments had vastly improved knowledge of the Moon's gravitational field and indicated a frightening possibility that the Moon might be hollow. The Moon is inside out, said this scientist. And as Carl Sagan said, a natural satellite cannot be a hollow object. These scientists from the Soviet Academy of Sciences, I talked about this at length in my books, wrote a major article in 1970 suggesting very strongly, with considerable evidence, that the Moon was actually a construct. And people like Ken Johnson, who've worked for NASA on photographs from the Moon, he's come out and said actually there are non-natural phenomena all over the Moon, including bases, things you can't explain that are not natural. And there are towers which have been smudged out, some of them not very badly. What the heck is that on the Moon? Here's a close-up of it. I mean, what's that? That's not natural. So where did it come from? Who put it there? This is called blue gem, or the blue circle, which it kind of shines electric blue. It was seen as a light from the 1700s by astronomers. Now we can see what it is, 29 miles in diameter. What the bloody hell is it? No one can say. And in so many ways, the Moon appears to be something akin to the Death Star moon in the Star Wars films. And indeed, two moons of Saturn look remarkably like the Death Star moon. And it, as I put it together over the years, is like an amplifier of the Saturn broadcasts, which are then fired at the Earth with far greater power and thus influence on our reality. And if you put that there, it kind of gives an indication of what I'm saying. Now, talked about that Charney project and what came out from it. Long after I've been talking like this about the Moon and its influence on our reality, this article came out, and in part of what was said in it, it talked about the Moon. They said this entity that they connected through a computer system with said the Moon is not a natural heavenly body. Life was better for humans before the Moon came. Moon forces control time and manipulate the mood of humans. The Moon is there to control the Earth's mood, emotion, and a big calm would come over the Earth without the Moon. There would be only little storms, not big storms. The old race, Archons, captured the Moon from space and located it next to the Earth. That is said to have happened by many, many ancient cultures. People and animals without the moon would become calm and peaceful, and anxiety and fear would dramatically decline. The oceans would be much calmer, heavy thunderstorms and lightning would be rare, and the climate would be balanced with no extreme heat or cold. Telepathic interdimensional communication would become widespread, and people would be able to see new colors, higher frequencies in an enhanced color spectrum. And that fits with the fact that this frequency, this matrix, is suppressing human expansion of awareness, keeping us in the box. There would be major changes. This really left field, this one. There would be major changes to the human respiratory system as blood and breathing chemistry changed. Those born after the moon's demise would be able to hold their breath underwater for hours at a time. The Saturn-Moon matrix. That's the reality we think is the world, the one that is locking us in to this round and round and round free society. Go to work, work, buy, consume, die. Work, buy, consume, die. That's the matrix that's playing us. Control the energy scene, you control human perception. We are in a band of frequency. A band of frequency is the matrix, a band of frequency of information. We are blinded by the light. We look at light and we think light is like luminous, but that's just the decoded expression of an energetic frequency field that we call light. And when they talk about God saying, "Let there be light" in the Old Testament, I would suggest that's far more likely this demiurge, fake God in this Genesis description, building the matrix. Let there be light. The speed of light in the walls of the matrix. Beyond that is beyond its walls of suppression. So people are within the matrix thinking it's the world going round and round and round, being played like a violin while they think they're playing the instrument. And like a prisoner in a pitch black cell, we may never be able to see the walls of our prison. And that is the wall, I would suggest. And that's why anyone gets close to saying we can go faster than the speed of light, the scientific establishment comes down on them like a pile of bricks. Real? Is it real? Is the night sky real, or is it a planetarium? I've been thinking that since I was a kid. Well, for a start, it only exists in that form in our heads, so quite easily can be just a construct rather than what we call natural. The archontic architects of our fake reality. And so this scene from the Matrix movie is absolutely perfect if you had two words. The Saturn-Moon matrix is everywhere. It is all around us, even now in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch, a prison for your mind. Human world, no, it's the Archon world, and they're trying to make it more and more the Archon world, which is why the world is changing in its image. And I came across these books of Carlos Castaneda long after I was into all this stuff, and I fell off my bloody chair nearly when I read some of it. They're based on the words of a Central American shaman called Don Juan Matus. And this is what he said. We have a predator that came from the depths of the cosmos and took over the rule of our lives. Human beings are its prisoners. The predator is our Lord and Master. It has rendered us docile, helpless. If we want to protest, it suppresses our protest. If we want to act independently, it demands that we do not do so. Indeed, we are its prisoner. They took over us because we are food to them, yes, low vibrational emotional energy. And they squeeze us mercilessly because we are their sustenance. Just as we rear chickens in coops, the predators rear us in human coops, human eros. Therefore, their food is always available to them, especially if there's lots of wars. Think for a moment and tell me how you would explain the contradictions between the intelligence of man the engineer and the stupidity of his systems of belief, or the stupidity of his contradictory behavior. Sorcerers believe that the predators have given us our systems of beliefs, yes, our ideas of good and evil, yes. Our social mores, they are the ones who have set up our dreams of success or failure. They have given us covetousness, greed, and cowardice. It is the predator who makes us complacent, routinary, and egomaniacal. In order to keep us obedient and meek and weak, the predators have engaged themselves in a stupendous maneuver. Stupendous, of course, from the point of view of a fighting strategist, a horrendous maneuver from the point of those who suffer it. They gave us their mind. The predator's mind is baroque, contradictory, morose, filled with the fear of being discovered any minute now. They gave us their mind because they gave us their frequency, and we are decoding their frequency and thus becoming part of their hive mind. The hive mind, the Archons, the reptilians, and the Borg in Star Trek, classic representation of the Archons. All of these different groups are said to operate with a hive mind, a hive mentality. And we've been connected to it. The Borgs, they were like transhumanist type figures, exactly really in the cyborg way that the Archons are described. And the Borg used to fly around in black, dark cubes. Why do humans blindly follow rules? Because they blindly follow the matrix. Don Matter said, I know that even now, even though you have never suffered hunger, you have food anxiety, which is none other than the anxiety of the predator who fears that any moment now its maneuver is going to be uncovered and food is going to be denied. Though through the mind, which is after all their mind, the predators inject into the lives of human beings whatever is convenient for them, and they ensure in this manner a degree of security to act as a buffer against their fear. Sorcerers of ancient Mexico reasoned that man must have been a complete being at one point, with stupendous insights, avatar society, feats of awareness that are mythological legends nowadays. And then everything seems to disappear and we have now a sedated man. What I'm saying is that we have against us is not a simple predator. It is very smart and organized. It follows a methodical system to render us useless. Man, the magical being that he's destined to be, is no longer magical. He is an average piece of meat. There are no more dreams for man than the dreams of an animal who is being raised to be a piece of meat, trite, conventional, imbecilic. And what they've done, because of our superior creative potential and expansion of consciousness potential, they have, although they are inferior to that in terms of potential because they are a distortion, they have reduced our, or that of the vast majority of humanity, to a lower level of awareness than they have. And thus this fits the situation perfectly. In the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. We are the blind. The Archons are the one-eyed king. But when we become the two-eyed, third-eyed, true consciousness that we are, game fricking over. Psychopaths have hijacked the world, and it's time to take it back. I have no power is what the Matrix keeps telling us, and what the agents of the Matrix keep telling us. You have to look to authority. We have the power. Awakened, we have the power, and humanity is awakening. And like I said right at the start, understanding the problem is to understand the solution. And we're starting to understand the problem. I'll be back in half an hour. Thank you.